Hey guys, Peter here to do an album review. Today I'm here to tell you about the latest from Swallow the Sun, Moonflowers, out November 19th on Century Media. This album has 8 tracks, 53 minutes in length, and this the band's 8th full-length studio album. They are a Finnish death doom metal band. As far as the structure goes, this album feels very unique to me. The experience that it gave me was one that I don't think I've ever had before. When I was listening to this album, I felt like they put forward a journey. There's this hallway, very narrow hallway, in which you move down the road or you move down that hallway step by step in a very methodic fashion. Sometimes you feel like it's moving a little bit faster, sometimes you feel like it's moving a little bit slower, but the experience is one that's very methodic in its process. At the end of that hallway, there's a door. You see the door from far away, and it becomes more clear as you get closer. When you get to the end of the record, the door is right in front of you and you're able to open. But here's the caveat, you don't get to see what's on the other side. The album finishes on a little bit of a cliffhanger. Almost like it's right there in front of you, but perhaps nothing more than a mirage, and it disappears as you try to reach for it. This way of constructing an album, this way of incorporating the soundscape and the atmosphere and the construction of the album really allows this record to have incredible playability. Because you feel like you've missed something when you get to the end. You feel like you're incomplete in the journey that you took. That's going to force you to go back to the beginning, listen to the record again, and see if there is any clues that you can find, that you can discover throughout the record that perhaps allows this journey to come to a much better conclusion and you're able to see what's behind that door. The beauty is, doesn't matter how many times you listen to it, you never get to see what's there, because it's not about ending a journey, because this doesn't feel like the end. It just feels like the process of going through and then repeating itself. And it's really about the individual to discover what's on the other side, not necessarily for the record to tell you what's there. Once it gets to the soundscape, this record falls in line with the 7 previous albums. It is Swallow the Sun. They didn't throw anything at the listener on this album that we hadn't seen before, but 2 things stand out in my opinion. One of them is how big the volume is. Rich, with depth, with warmth, with a little bit of a soul, with a little bit of a heartbeat, and it really pushes forward. It's an album that has ebbs and flows, but it feels very methodic in its sound. Sometimes you feel like you're not moving at all while the record is pulling you up and bringing you back down almost instantly. So it's a lot more dynamic than it appears, because the atmosphere kind of hides a little bit of those dynamic motions. The other side of this record that's really important is that atmosphere. There's a cloak, an emotional cloak that covers this record, and it will embrace anybody who's listening to it. And at the end of the album, you feel drained. It's an emotionally driven record, and it's a draining album, but one that drains you without you necessarily feeling that drain throughout the album. You feel it at the end of the journey, you feel it at the end of the record because of that sense of being incomplete, but you don't necessarily notice it from track to track because it moves really well. The soundscape almost merges from song to song, carrying a lot of the same elements from track to track, allowing the record to have this seamless motion and being very direct in its approach. Very methodic, but very direct as well. Within that soundscape, there are a couple of elements that become the cornerstones of the album. You have to talk about the orchestrations, the keyboards, the strings. The beauty of sound that they provide to this record really fills in all the gaps that the album could have. But it also adds to the atmosphere that this album creates. While not being a driving element of the experience of the record, it creates an important part of the atmosphere that it puts forward. And without it, the album would lose a little bit of its life, would lose a little bit of its charisma. So it works really well in permeating throughout the entire album, but never being the road that the record travels on. It's rather just another layer under the asphalt that weaves itself in and out, becoming an integral part of the sound, sometimes without even you noticing it, that it is an integral part of that sound. The drums feel like the soul of this record, or even a little bit of the heartbeat of the album, but more the soul. They have incredible warmth, very nice sound, very balanced, and always allowing this record to feel like it has a constant line. If you think about the heart monitor in a hospital, and you think about death, you think about a flat line. This album feels a lot like a flat line, but there are bursts, there are heartbeats that push this record upwards and downwards. But the drums always feel like they are that flat line. That balanced approach from beginning to end really stabilizes the sound on this album. The guitars are a little bit more dynamic. Perhaps those peaks and valleys are created by them. A little bit more dynamic here, a little bit more dynamic there, allowing the album to have a little bit more life. Some of the volume comes from it. A lot of the heaviness that this album has also comes from the guitars. They push the strings, they push the musical strings on this record, and they push the emotional strings that this album has. The guitar sound is really well defined, and it really encapsulates the overall atmosphere, the overall vibe that this record has to offer. On top of it all, you have the vocals. I felt like this is an album that if you're looking at scales as far as harsh and clean vocals, the scale tips towards more of the clean vocals. I really felt it was more clean vocally driven album all around. The harsh vocals help break through that mist of the clean vocals, and because they come in and they break through it, they sound a lot heavier than if they had more of a predominant role. It's really interesting from that perspective. You use less of it, but when they come across, they feel a lot heavier, which gives a more notion of heavier songs all around. Not because you're using it a lot, but because you're using it sporadically and in the right moments in order to create those pushes and really allow this album to have bounces, not just being stable or linear all the way through vocally, because it's not musically. Overall, this is not a record that I can define in terms of where it stands in the scale of all 8 records delivered by Swallow the Sun. But I can tell you this, it's better than their last record, and that says a lot. I don't think I need to say more than that. As far as favorite songs are concerned, Moonflowers, Bloom in Misery, this is the opening track. I love this opening track. The guitar melody is so melancholic in this song. The strings come in and they just pack into the overall experience that this track has to offer. There is some heaviness in this song, and that heaviness explodes at times. The strings remain very balanced, very constant. They weave in and out, but when they're there, they're always at the same level. They're a little bit of that flat line all the way through. And then there's other elements like the guitars that allow themselves to explode a little bit more, packed in with the aggression and intensity of the harsh vocals to really create the ebbs and flows that this song has to offer. The DNA of the track gets pushed wider and wider, up and down, depending on where you are within the song. It feels like a melancholic wasteland, but it's not. There are enough bursts of aggression and intensity to make this a very dynamic song all around. Next we have All Hallows Grieve featuring Cammy of Oceans of Slumber. What an incredible duet. All clean vocals, incredible duet, a song that blew my mind. It's an incredible track. It has this rich approach to it, the way it weaves. You have guitars, you have keys, you have strings, you have everything above, the drums, everything is intertwined from beginning to end. Using one element, replacing that element with a different one, carrying a lot of the same melodies forward, just with different players coming into the forefront. Then you have these 2 incredible vocalists that work parallel to each other, and then finally they cross paths and they become one, allowing the song to gain intensity without necessarily making it heavy and without making it aggressive, but just 2 incredible vocalists working together and allowing their voices to command the attention of the listener, while the music and the backdrop really becomes the soundtrack to everything that is happening. This is a magnificent duet through and through, from a song construction, from the soundscape, from what they're doing vocally. This is just an outstanding track. Last but not least, This House Has No Name. This is the last song on the album, and this is a song that gives you that sense of finality but of a cliffhanger at the same time. I felt also that this is the heaviest track on the album. Now, it's not consistently heavy from beginning all the way to the end. This is not a Cannibal Corpse song, so it's not death metal from start to finish. But the intensity, the aggression that it has, both musically and vocally, when it's heavy, is brutally heavy. Now, there are some moments within this track that the mood comes down, the clean vocals come in, and the song becomes a lot more melancholic. That doom influence definitely takes control of the track and creates extreme lows. The interesting aspect of this track is that there is no way of navigating this song in a smooth way. Its peaks, valleys, and its constant change between one and the other. It's an absolute roller coaster ride musically and emotionally. It just drives a lot of experience forward, and it has the listener always on the edge of its seat. This is it. Swallow the Sun, Moonflowers, out November 19th on Century Media. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Use the comment section below. I'll be reading those and getting back to you. Take care, guys.